Hello everyone, so today I'm finally releasing the last videos that I didn't translated in English. So first we will see the Fate skill, and then I will do the shopping guide. So first for the Fate skills. First we're gonna see Bam's Fate skill. So all these informations are available on the wiki. So on togw.gg on each main character page. So this one is a BAM page. So first you will have Healing Light, that is a fate skill that's gonna heal or your team based on attack. So it's something you get very early on in the tutorial. This skill can be useful early on because you will maybe lack healing, but you will see replacing it with time goes on. So it can be interesting, but it's a bit specific. It can still be used on content where you're gonna really struggle with healing and you want to make your units survive a bit more. But a lot of the times you will replace it or use it very late in your skill order. I will talk about order a bit later. Then you have Anak Fate skill. So this one simply does damage. It's gonna deals damage around the enemy with the highest attack. So it's gonna target some specific target and do AoE damage. This one is kinda good for damage purely, but it does quite some damage. Then you have the Undersea one that you get very early on also, that deals damage too. So this one deals damage 2 times, so it's not as bad as people think. You have really to take into account the fact that it's hitting 2 times, but it simply does damage, and as we're gonna see later on, there are more interesting active fate skills. Then you have Red Velvet Sword, so Yuri one. This one is very important. You find it in the summon shop, so I will talk about it in the shop video. But this one is very important because it's basically one of the best fate skill in the game. It's gonna deal insane amount of damage, and on top of this, it's gonna decrease all your teammates' cooldowns by a lot for 5 seconds, and so it's very interesting, and it's gonna still do a lot of damage. So it's very useful pretty much everywhere. It's good in all content. It does AoE damage, so it's very good, and you can burst with this and kill enemies faster. And it's very good, and the cooldown reduction is great for bosses and everything, and so it's an awesome fate skill. So this one you will really want to try to focus and upgrade, and this is where you're gonna spend a lot of Great Family bookmarks. So this one is the first very important one. Then there is Skill Wave, so lower way one. This one deals decent damage in AoE once again, and it's gonna bind enemies for 2 seconds. So bind is a control. So this one is really good because it's a AoE control on BAM, and it can be really interesting in a lot of content, and you will be able to delay to buy time basically with BAM with this skill, and it's gonna be really useful in combination with the next skill we're gonna see. So this one you will also upgrade some, but you will need the Tower Climber bookmark for another fate skill, so don't put everything on this one. But even for the damages, this one is really good, so it's a really good fate skill. Then you have reverse flow control, so a very important fate skill. Really keep in mind this one. This one is gonna teleport BAM behind the targeted enemy. It's gonna deal damage and it's gonna inflict the knockback. So one thing that is very important with this fate skill is that during this fate skill, BAM is gonna become untargetable, and so it's gonna avoid a lot of enemy skills and enemy damage. And so with this you can bait enemies, and you can make them target BAM, and it's gonna do this skill, and it's gonna cancel out the attack basically. And it can work with a lot of enemies, and you will see that this skill single-handedly can carry you through a lot of stuff that can be TOT or Rise-Pot. You don't necessarily need to upgrade it a ton because it's gonna only affect the damage, and that's not really the thing you're using it for, but it's very interesting strategically and for a lot of content. And there is also one thing that is very important, is that since it's gonna teleport behind some enemies, it's gonna split your team. So a lot of AoE, area of effect attacks, are gonna only target BAM, and so you will this way protect your ranged teammate. And for specific enemies like the big laser guys, for example, sometimes you can redirect their attacks towards the right side of the screen, and so you can completely remove a lot of damage on your team. So it's very important skill. This one I really suggest playing for a ton of content. We will see this a bit later on at the end of the video when I talk about fate skill orders. But this one I use a ton on Rise-Pot or TOT when using BAM, and it's very good, and it can unlock you on a ton of things. And one thing to keep in mind also is you are able to manually launch skills, meaning that even if you play in automatic mode, if you tap on one fate skill, you can manually launch it. And this one, it can be very important to manually launch it a lot of the times, because maybe the base timing of it is not gonna be perfect. And so if you have a good understanding of the game, you can manually time it. I'm not gonna really cover this on this video because it will maybe be the subject of my big next video that will be the strategy one. But just a heads up with this skill, it's very important to have decent timing for certain attacks. And so if you understand when the enemy is gonna channel one attack, you can time it well so it cancels the attack, and this way you're gonna survive. So I'm giving you the idea, not really explaining in details how to do it because I can't cover it right now, but you have to keep this in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's gonna put him on the middle of the enemy team, and so he can use the other AoE skill like Yuri's one and Lori one on the entire enemy team. And so that makes it a great combo to put this one and other AoE skills after it to burst the enemy. Then you have Hunter's Roar, Hunter Rack Fate skill. So this one is gonna buff crit damage on all your teammates. So this one is mostly for longer content, so things like administrator's trials or bosses. But this one, you have something that is important to keep in mind, is that on some content where your team is gonna survive some time, like even on Rise-Pot, it can still be better than some medium fate skill. So like in my opinion, Hunter's Roar is gonna bring more damage, for example in Rise-Pot, than those attack skill. And so if you purely want damage, you will be playing this one very early into your rotation to just deal more damage. So in Rise-Pot, for example, you can put it in first or second skill just to buff your damage, and so this way you're gonna kill the first waves quicker. And so it can be used like this. But mostly on other content like story or TOT, where it's very important the first few seconds, you can't really use this one because BAM is gonna die really quickly. And so you really want to mostly use reverse flow control and red velvet sword and skill wave. And so you won't be having the time. You won't have the time to use this one, basically. Then you have Waryun skill. So this one is in the PvP shop. Using the con you gain in Ranker Wars. This one is really good for admin. because it's a decreased defense on enemies for 16 seconds, so it's very long. This one you really have to keep in mind that it only applies to some enemies, and so if you kill them, it's not gonna reapply. So for content like Rice Spot, it's very hard to use. It doesn't mean that you can't use it. It can be interesting on some very tanky units, for example. Like you have the big worms that sometimes are very annoying and hard to kill. And sometimes it can be interesting to use Cheer Up My God if you have the time, if your BAM doesn't die instantly. But it's kind of the same as for Hunter's Roar, is that in a lot of content you won't have the time to use it. So it will mostly be for admin, but for admin it's very good. So for admin it is a lot of damage, you will be using it very early, and you can also upgrade it since you got a War Union event if you played at the beginning of the game. If you played when I'm releasing this video. So it can be really interesting. You can upgrade it if you have FUG bookmarks. And yeah, it's a great skill for admin, and admin is a very important content. Then we will talk about the Fate skill, the Fate passives, sorry. So the first one is Reverse Charm. So this one is the Ren one. It's gonna increases magic damage. So you have to keep in mind that this only applies to BAM. If it applied to all teammates, there will be typed out all teammates. It only applies to BAM, and so it makes it interesting, but not as interesting as some people would think. It's still very good though, because BAM is an insane DPS for admin. And so it can be interesting, but once again, it's in the family shop, and so it can be a bit hard to get early on. It takes some time, but it's very good for admin. And if you get it, definitely improve it quite a bit. You can put some bookmarks in it, and it's for admin damage once again, and it's very important. So that's why I think it's still a great Fate skill, even though it's a bit hard to get. Then you have Grey Dwarf's Descendant. It's Evan's Fate skill. This one you get in the affinity level. You get it quite late, so you won't get it very early, but it's gonna heal all your team when BAM goes into ignition. So this one can be useful on some specific content, like Tours of Hardship or things like this, when you cannot really bring healers every time. But it's gonna be very specific, because you need BAM to TR for this, to go into ignition, and so it takes a lot of time, and you can't use this everywhere. It's very useful on some content, like I said, like on hardships you will struggle to bring healers every time, so it can be really good, like on a lot of floors where you don't have healers, but you won't be using this everywhere. And you have some interesting passives elsewhere also if you have Reverse Charm, so it's a bit complicated for this one. Then you have Spirit of Swordsmanship, adds passive. This one is very important. It's the best Fate skill on BAM, in my opinion. It's gonna increase Tower Climber teammates' crit damage by an insane amount, honestly. So this one you should really focus and improve a lot, upgrade a lot with the Tower of Climber bookmarks. And it's gonna increase your admin damage and your damage everywhere a lot. Also, if you have other Tower Climber allies like Sachi Faker or Anak, it's gonna improve them a lot. And so it's really an excellent Fate skill. For admin it's very good, because they gave us a great unit to go with it, because they gave us Sachi Faker and Zaya. So Zaya is gonna increase your entire team crit chance, and this is gonna increase Tower Climber crit damage. And so it's gonna go very well with BAM and Sachi. And it's overall a very insane Fate skill, and you should definitely improve it a lot for admin. Then you have Deceiving Girl. So this one you get extremely late in the affinity level. It's gonna increase all teammates' magic damage by a great percentage and decrease BAM's defense. This one is really good but it's extremely late. So you will use it and you will improve it, but when, I don't know. Even myself, I don't have it. I can probably get it if I reset every character with diamonds, but it costs a lot of diamonds, so I don't know if I should do it right now. And it's a very late game thing because affinity level 51 is a lot, and on ban specifically it's quite hard because we will upgrade a ton on Viole affinity too, so, and also on first on barm characters are important, so it's very hard to only focus BAM affinity, so it's gonna come very late, but it's a really good fate skill. Then we have murder martial art, Shibisu fate skill. It's gonna decrease enemies' accuracy when using the ignition. So basically, this skill it's very hard to use. Once again, skills applying on the ignition are a bit niche because it needs BAM to go into TR, and so it takes time and it takes ignition gauge. So you can use it defensively. You will use it pretty much when you don't have anything else. When you don't have reverse charm or Evan's fate skill, but it's not very good, and it's very, accuracy can be great on some content. Decreases enemy accuracy can be useful on things like TOT, but since it only procs after ignition, it takes a lot of time, so I don't really like this one. I don't recommend upgrade it a ton because it costs tower climber bookmarks, and you need this for at passive. So now for Viole. So for Viole, the first one is Beta's Fate skill. It's gonna increase ultimate attack speed for 10 seconds. So this one is very good. You will get it quite early for Viole, and you can use it very fast, and it's gonna improve your entire team DPS. So it's very good. Attack speed is gonna impact also animation speed. So it makes a lot of things go faster, and you can have better skills rotation this way. It's overall a very good fate skill, and thank God is there because Viole doesn't has a lot of good fate skill right now. So it's really good for now, and I definitely recommend upgrading it. The only issue is that to upgrade it, you need beta. That isn't a really good legendary unit, and also it uses Freedom Dreamer bookmarks, and this one you're gonna use for another fate skill on Viole. So this is the bit complicated part, but you will be upgraded anyway a bit. Then you have Demonic Storm, Jinsung Fate skill. This one is not available at the moment, so I'm not gonna talk a lot about it, but overall it's very good. It deals damage, AoE damage, and also it decreases attack speed, so it's quite useful to decrease enemies' damage. But it's not available, so you won't be playing it just now, but when it's available, you will definitely play it, especially because Viole doesn't have a lot of good fate skill. Then you have Run Fate skill. So this one is the equivalent to Rachel Fate skill. You get it in affinity level 51, so it's very late. It only deals damage, and it's not a lot of damage. I'm not gonna bother talking a lot about this one. It's not really good, and it's in so much time that you won't need me, and you won't be watching my videos anyway. Then you have Blood Tamara, the Varaga Fate skill. This one is quite good. You get it very late though, because you get it on the last step, but it's gonna increase all the FUG defense, and for 15 seconds. And so it's quite good because now that we have white, kinda everyone is playing FUG. And so you have Viole that is FUG, you have white that is FUG, and you can use Varagav as well, that is epic character that is very good for now. That increases also the FUG's damage and everything. And so it makes a great synergy with a lot of characters. It works also with Jinsung if you summon for him. and so it's a quite okay skill, and Viole doesn't has a ton of them, like I said a million times, so it's decent, and it's increasing defense, so that's good. Then you have Volcanic Eruption, Yeon Fate skill. It deals AoE damage. It's very simple skill, not very useful, but it's better than nothing. The only downside is that you get it in the summon shop on a resource that is quite important. So this one I will talk into details on the shop videos, but mostly it's cool to get, but it's not game breaking, and it costs a lot. It costs some resources, so get it if you can, but you can also upgrade it a bit if you get Yeon, but Yeon is oh no, now it's on the permanent banner, so you can get her. But it's only damage, but it can help you on some levels, so why not? Then you have Orion Fate skill. So this one knockbacks the enemy. You get in affinity level 11, so it's not very hard to get, and it deals some damage. So this one is a bit weird because it's really hard to use it. It's gonna be really useful on some stages against melee enemies that you're gonna push back, and it's gonna save you a lot of time. But it's quite hard to do because of a very specific thing about the game. I won't go into detail about this right now because it's a topic for the advanced strategy one, and it's quite complicated, so I don't want to mix everyone's mind since this video is mostly for beginners. But just know that sometimes this skill is not gonna be beneficial for you. So the only thing I'm gonna tell you right now, if you don't plan on watching the advanced strategy video, is sometimes try removing it. Trust me, sometimes try removing it, and it can help you, especially if you have characters that control enemies. I'm gonna talk into detail later on about this one, but the game works in a weird way when it comes to controls and knockbacks, and so sometimes having a knockback is not beneficial. And so sometimes it can be beneficial to remove this skill, or to only use it for damage, so to only use it when you kill the enemy. So that's all I'm gonna say about this. But overall, it's a good fate skill. It can help a ton on some enemies, and it deals some decent damage. So that's to keep in mind. Then you have Reflero fate skill. This one is quite interesting. It does AoE damage and decreased defense, but sadly it's in the family shop, family coin shop, and so it's like a Ren skill. It's very hard to get it. It takes a lot of time. We're gonna have King's Order added on permanent content on the next patch, so we will get more family coin. So you will be able to get this one much easier. But either way, it takes a bit of time. It's an interesting Viole skill, and if you can get it, definitely do. It deals some damage and decreases defense. It can be really good for TOT, especially because you're gonna use Viole everywhere in TOT at some point. And so yeah, it's a decent fate skill, I will say. You can upgrade it some if you got Reflejo to upgrade it. It's gonna increase the defense percentage, and that's quite good. Then you have Crimson Soul Fist. This one is interesting, but it only does damage to one target, the nearest enemy, and so it's very specific. You can get it, it's in the summon shop. It takes some resources, but it's not that expensive to get. And it can still help you, because on TOT you're gonna be against few enemies, and so getting a few hundred % magic damage on some enemies can be some help. So it's kind of like a Yeon Fate skill. It's not game breaking, but it can help. It's better than nothing. See it this way. But definitely don't invest a lot of resources into this one. Only upgrade it a bit if you have resources, but don't really focus it. Then you have the passives. So for the passives, we have first Zaya's one that you get in the affinity. So this one is gonna increase crits, all teammates crits, and Thug teammate crit damage. So it procs on ignition skill once again. This takes a lot of time because it takes a character. It needs the character to TR to work. But this one increases a bit the DPS. You will get it a bit late because it's affinity level 31. But it can be interesting, and especially now that people can have white. White is a really huge Thug DPS, and so increasing Thug DPS is very good. So it only lasts 5 seconds, so it's not game breaking, but it's interesting to get, and on some content you will be using it. That's all I'm gonna say. You won't be able to upgrade it a lot because of the next passive, but it's interesting on some content, and you will be using it. Then you have the big winner, the big fate skill in the game, Dignity of the Ancient Species. So this one is mini rack passive, and let's say that it's maybe the best, the most broken fate skill in the game, because it decreases all teammates' incoming physical damage, and so it's active all the time from the first second of the fight, and it applies on everyone, and it decreases at such an insane amount that it's really absurd. So you really want to upgrade it a ton, and when I mean a ton, I mean like focus everything you got into this. On the little chest where you can choose a bookmark, definitely choose Freedom Dreamer because of this skill, and improve it a ton. You're gonna use Viole for a lot of content, especially later on. You're gonna use it a ton for TOT, Rise Spot, and everything, and this one can make all your units so much tankier. There is so much stages where you're just gonna die instantly if you don't use this skill. It's really, 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 really strong. I can't stress it enough, and you definitely will be using it every time you're using Viole. It's extremely good, and you can only remove it on very specific content. Maybe on bosses when you really don't need tankiness and everything, and even on this one, like if you check for raid bosses, the event right now when you fight big boss that are immune to certain type of damage, using this can make your team survive, like on some enemies like the bull that is very hard to survive on. This one can just help you survive it, so it's very, very strong. I really suggest you to really focus on this and use it a ton. And it can be a reason to use Viole a lot of the time. Even above BAM, if you got BAM way more upgraded and everything, because this fate skill is absolutely broken. So definitely use it. Then you have Bong Bong and Dorsey fate skill that increases attack speed by a certain amount. Once again, this one only applies to Viole because it doesn't say all teammates, but it's quite cool. It improves attack speed on a character that needs some, because he's gonna get some control and he's gonna get some damage. It's not game breaking in any way, but it's a passive that is active everywhere. This one doesn't need ignition, and so I will say it's the most versatile one on Viole after the last one that is very good. You will be using it. If you have Bong Bong and Dorsey, you can improve it. But even without improving, the base stats of it are not that bad. So definitely don't just remove it because you only has it skill level 1. It's not that big of a deal. It's still gonna be really useful, especially if you can't reach ignition. Because if you can reach ignition, we're gonna see that there are other fate skills that can be interesting. But if you can't reach ignition, or if you disable your Viole ignition, because also for all ignition skill, if you disable the character's TR, it's not gonna work. The characters needs to go into TR, and so if you disable it, or if it doesn't meet the requirement for TR, I explained this a lot in the admin video, it's not gonna proc the fate skill, the fate passive. And so you will need the characters to go into TR. And in a lot of content, personally, I disable Viole TR, and so I can't use all the Ignition Fate passive, and so I will be using this one. But if you can TR, you will probably use something else. Talking about something else, you have White Mirror Kun Fate skill. So this one applies on the Ignition, like I just said, and it's gonna put immunity on one teammate and recovers over time his health. So this one is interesting. The damage immunity is very short, so it's not gonna be really game breaking. It's gonna save some time, but the recover HP parts can be really good, especially if you don't use a ton of healers, because it's gonna bring some heal back on a specific teammate, and so it can be really interesting. And so yeah, I will say this skill is interesting. Don't overestimate it in any way, because once again, it only procs on Ignition, and this can be hard to reach, but it's still an interesting skill. And Viole doesn't have a lot of passives, a lot of really good passives, so I will say definitely use this one. But on every content you don't use the Ignition, definitely use something else. But it's interesting, you can increase it a bit if you got White Mirror Cone. It's gonna improve the healing, it can be interesting. But yeah, don't focus it too much, because it's not that important to improve it. And then you have Love Fate skill that is not available. It's gonna increase defense when Ignition is used. This one is interesting but not available. When it will be an interesting defensive skill, because it's 7 seconds. The defense buff is not insane, it's not a lot, but I think it's still better on some situations than Kun 1, I will say, even though it can be a bit niche. Then you have Verdi's one that is not available as well. This one is more interesting because it only works on Ignition skill as well, but it increases all enemies cooldown. And so this is an interesting property, especially on PvE, where a lot of enemies has very impactful casts. Like the big laser guy, you don't want them to cast a lot. And so if you can increase their cooldowns, it's very good. And so this Verdi passive skill can be interesting for this. And it will definitely can see some use when we will get it. But for now, it's not available. And then we have Urek Fate skill that also works on Ignition. And it's gonna deals damage to all enemies. And it's gonna deals bonus damage to faction barriers. So this skill is very specific. It deals not a lot of damage. I don't really see it, honestly. And I don't really understand why you won't be using like Zaya skill for damage otherwise. So I don't really see it, but maybe on very specific cases to remove faction barriers, I really don't think. But yeah. Okay, so now for Fate skill order. For BAM, on a lot of content you will be using this. So personally I use this a lot. So Quant Fate skill in first to cancel out a lot of things, and to put BAM in a good position, and to split it from the front line and your other member of the team. And then the big skill that I'll talk about, Yuri and Lore Fate skill, that are very impactful. And this is gonna deal a ton of damage on enemies. And so if you manage to do all those 3 skills, it's gonna deal a lot of damage, and a lot of the time it's gonna carry you through your level. Then you can put only more damage. You can also slot in Kun Fate skill if you need. And on passive Fate skill, it's not gonna move a ton for BAM. For different content like admin, you will use a different order. So I've talked about it in the admin video, but you will be using things like things like this. So you will be using Yuri Fate skill for damage and the cooldowns, and then Waryun for the defense and Rak for the buffs, and then scrap damage. But this is for bosses. You will be using this for BAM. It's pretty straightforward, and I don't need to explain it a lot. And then for some content where you want to manually use Quant Fate skill, the thing that I suggest to do is to put Quant Fate skill very late into the rotation. So you can put it in last because you're gonna be using it manually. And when you use skill manually, it doesn't matter where it is on the bar. And so putting it last will ensure you that it doesn't launch without you wanting it to. And then you can put other skills. So either you put Yuri and Lore if you rush it, but if you want it to go after the Quant Fate skill, you can put it after things like Interact Fate skill, or maybe Kun Fate skill if you need healing, just to delay the usage of those two. And so you can manually wait for some specific timing on Quant Fate skill, and afterwards it's gonna use the very important Yuri skill. So I know that without any example, it's quite hard to explain, but sadly I can't really show you because I don't have content where I can show you. I don't have Rise Spot and everything, so I can't really show you, and I don't have recordings of them. But I'm giving you the idea, guys, because it can be interesting. And manually using Quant Fate skill can be really interesting for things like Rise Spot. So keep that in mind. For Viole, I don't really know why I'm talking about it, because honestly it's very straightforward. You can put every Fate skill since we don't have a lot. I don't have the Reflator one, so I can't use it. If I add it, I will use it very early on, so probably after beta 1. But overall it's gonna look like this. You only put the most interesting ones at the beginning, and then you scrape for damage pretty much. And in Fate skill, I'm using this a lot, like 99% of the time, I will say. I'm using those two. And you can use Kun 1 on specific content, especially when you can go into TR, as I said. But don't overestimate it a lot. It can be really useful. I don't want you to think that it's a bad Fate skill. It's good, but it's specific. I see a lot of people saying that it's very good. In my opinion, Fate skill that procs on Ignition are a bit niche by design. So think about this. But on some content it's very good. On some bosses it's very good. On things like King's Order, when you will play Viole anyway. Scrapping for some heal can be very good. Using this skill alone can make you remove healers for King's Order, for example. So definitely keep using this skill and try using it on some content. But don't put it everywhere thinking that it's gonna save you, because it only procs on Ignition. This one is gonna proc everywhere, so sometimes it's gonna be better. And this one is very hard to remove, honestly, it's so broken. And if you can have it above level 13, because you can probably, if you focus it better than me, it can be really interesting. So that's it for the Fate skill videos. Sorry I went a bit into details, but I really wanted to talk a lot about some details on some skills. For the things where I teased for a later video, I hope I can release it in some early times, because I don't want people to wait a ton on videos. But I'm really struggling with time on some weeks, so it's very hard for me to release videos. I hope this one can be useful for people. I know that it comes very late for a lot of you, but it can be interesting for some people, and yeah, I hope you have fun on the game. And don't forget to put any questions you have on the comments, and I will answer.